The storm lashed against the windows of County Memorial Hospital with the fury of a trapped beast. Sarah Connor pushed a strand of silvery white hair behind her ear as she filled out the final chart of her 12-hour shift. Her pale skin seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights, making her look almost ethereal among the bustle of the emergency department. At 27, she was the youngest senior nurse on staff, respected for her skills, but kept at a distance by colleagues who found her otherworldly appearance unsettling. "Hell of a night, Connor," Dr. Matthews said, dropping a stack of charts beside her. "That domestic violence victim would have died if you hadn't caught the internal bleeding when you did." Sarah nodded without looking up. "Just doing my job." What she didn't say was that she had felt the bleeding before she saw it, a strange sensation like warmth beneath her fingers when she checked the woman's abdomen. These moments had been happening more frequently lately. Intuitions she couldn't explain but had learned to trust. Heading home, be careful on Mountain Pass Road. Storms knocked down trees all over the county. Sarah gathered her things, feeling the familiar weight of isolation settle around her shoulders. She had chosen the solitary cabin 20 miles from town because it offered escape from the whispers and sideways glances. Pale as a ghost, strange eyes, something not quite right about that Connor girl. The hospital doors slid open, inviting in the howl of wind and rain. Sarah pulled her coat tighter and ran toward her old Subaru, soaked within seconds. As she settled behind the wheel, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, her pale eyes staring back with a question she couldn't answer. "I am an outcast, a nurse shunned by those around me," she whispered to herself, a ritual of acknowledgement that somehow made the loneliness easier to bear. Until one day perhaps someone will see what others have missed. Lightning split the sky as she navigated the winding forest road toward home. The wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge, and Sarah leaned forward, straining to see the treacherous curves. Her cabin lay nestled in the heart of the Oregon wilderness, the last property before national forest lands stretched unbroken for miles. She was nearly home when her headlights caught something in the road ahead. Sarah slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly before coming to a stop. Through the curtain of rain, she saw a fallen tree blocking her path. "Perfect," she muttered, turning off the engine. She was still a mile from her cabin. With no cell service and the storm raging, her options were limited. Sarah grabbed her medical bag, a habit born from years of emergency calls, and started walking. The rain hammered against her wind, whipping her coat as she followed the beam of her flashlight along the familiar road. By the time the dark silhouette of her cabin emerged from the gloom, Sarah was drenched and shivering. She hurried up the porch steps, fumbling with frozen fingers for her keys, when a sound stopped her cold. Not the crack of thunder or the moan of wind through trees, but something alive. A whimper of pain coming from the side of her house. Sarah hesitated. Living alone in the wilderness meant being cautious. But the sound came again, raw with suffering, and her medical training overrode caution. She directed her flashlight toward the source. The beam illuminated something impossible. A wolf lay sprawled across her side porch, its silver fur matted with blood that appeared black in the darkness. But this was no ordinary wolf. It was massive, at least twice the size of any wolf she had seen in nature documentaries, its body easily the length of a grown man. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Wolves weren't native to this part of Oregon anymore. Occasional sightings were reported, but nothing like this. The rational part of her brain warned of danger, but something deeper, something instinctive pushed her forward. "Hey there, big guy," she said softly, approaching with slow, deliberate movements. "You're pretty banged up, aren't you?" The wolf's head lifted slightly, revealing eyes that glowed amber in the flashlight beam. Those eyes locked onto hers with shocking intelligence, alert and somehow grateful. There was no aggression in its posture, only pain and something that looked remarkably like hope. Sarah knelt beside the injured creature, professional assessment taking over. Multiple lacerations crossed its hide, but the most serious injury was a wound in its left shoulder that appeared to be a gunshot, leaking dark blood onto her porch. The edges of the wound had an unusual blackish tinge that didn't look like normal infection. "Someone really did a number on you," she murmured, setting down her flashlight to open her medical bag. "But you're going to be okay. I'm going to help you." The wolf remained unnaturally still as she worked cleaning and assessing its injuries by the beam of her flashlight. It released occasional soft whimpers that tugged at something inside her chest. The gunshot wound concerned her most. The bullet had gone through cleanly, But that strange blackness around the edges worried her. As Sarah gently cleaned the wound, something extraordinary happened. When her fingers made contact with the damaged flesh, a strange tingling sensation spread through her hand. Warmth flowed from her fingertips, and for a brief moment, a soft golden light seemed to emanate from beneath her skin. The wolf's eyes widened, fixing on her face with startling intensity. "That's strange," Sarah whispered, pulling back slightly. "I must be more tired than I thought." She finished dressing the wounds, puzzled by the peaceful compliance of what should have been a wild, dangerous predator. "There," she said finally, "that should help, but you really need a vet. I don't suppose you know any good ones around here?" The wolf's amber eyes studied her face with unnerving focus, as if memorizing every feature. Then something impossible happened. The air around the wolf began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Sarah blinked hard, convinced exhaustion was playing tricks on her vision. But the shimmering intensified. The wolf's form blurred and shifted. Bones cracked and reformed with sounds that made Sarah's stomach lurch. Muscle and sinew flowed like water, reshaping into human proportions. Where moments before a massive silver wolf had lain bleeding, now sprawled a man. Tall and powerfully built, with shoulder-length black hair and the same extraordinary amber eyes that had gazed at her from the wolf's face. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. Scars crisscrossed his torso, telling stories of violence and survival. "Thank you," he said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble. Despite his obvious weakness, he made no move to cover himself. "My name is Ethan Gray, and I believe you just saved my life." Sarah scrambled backward, her back hitting the porch railing. Her medical bag clattered to the wooden planks. "This isn't happening," she gasped. "People don't turn into wolves. I'm hallucinating from exhaustion." "You're not hallucinating," Ethan said, wincing as he struggled to sit up. "Humans and werewolves have lived parallel lives for centuries. We stay hidden, but we exist alongside your world." He gestured to his bandaged shoulder. "I'm not dangerous to you, but those who did this to me are." Before Sarah could respond, a new sound echoed through the storm, a long, haunting howl that raised the hair on her arms and sent chills down her spine. Then another answered it, and another, until the night filled with the voices of what sounded like an entire pack. Ethan's expression grew grim as he listened. "My pack has found me," he said. "They've been searching since the attack." Sarah peered into the darkness beyond her porch light. She could see nothing but felt the weight of unseen eyes watching from the forest. "How many are there?" 23, Ethan answered without hesitation. "They won't approach without permission. This is your territory, though." As if summoned by his words, a man emerged from the tree line. Tall and broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair, despite appearing in his mid-40s, he moved with the predatory grace of a soldier. His eyes, a deep forest green, scanned the area before settling on Sarah with undisguised suspicion. "Alpha," he called, his voice carrying easily through the storm. "We've secured the perimeter. Are you able to move?" Ethan straightened, authority entering his voice despite his injured state. "David, this woman has treated my wounds. Show respect." The man named David inclined his head slightly towards Sarah, though wariness remained in his posture. "Forgive the intrusion, ma'am. We mean no disrespect to your territory, but our Alpha was ambushed 3 days ago. We've been tracking him since." Sarah looked between them, reality tilting beneath her feet. "This is insane," she said, backing toward her door. "Werewolves aren't real. They're myths, stories, movies with bad special effects." "I assure you we are very real," Ethan said, his amber eyes holding hers. "And right now, my people are concerned for my safety. They can smell my blood, sense my pain. They're also aware you've helped me, which creates complications." A new voice spoke from the shadows. "Indeed it does." An elderly man stepped onto the porch, moving with surprising agility despite his apparent age. His hair was silver, his face weathered by time, but his gray eyes sharp as steel. He carried himself with quiet dignity, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to blend with the shadows. "Solomon," Ethan acknowledged, respect evident in his tone. The old man nodded before turning to Sarah. His gaze was penetrating, as if seeing through layers of her being. "You saved our Alpha when we could not reach him. A debt the pack cannot forget or easily repay." He inhaled deeply, his expression changing to one of surprise. "You have a scent like someone I met 50 years ago, a woman whose hands could heal." "I'm just a nurse." Sarah said, finding her voice. I did what anyone would do. Solomon's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. Would anyone approach a wolf of such size without fear? Would anyone see a man transform before their eyes and not run screaming? He turned to Ethan. The wound alpha. May I see it? Ethan pulled aside the bandage. The gunshot wound had an unnatural blackness spreading from its center, the surrounding veins darkening like tendrils of ink beneath his skin. Solomon's expression darkened. This is no ordinary silver bullet wound. This carries magic old and malevolent. Morgana has joined with Kieran then. David swore under his breath. We suspected as much when we found the tracks. Solomon turned back to Sarah. Your home is in danger, Miss Connor. Kieran's pack will follow Ethan's scent here, and they bring with them a witch whose power is matched only by her cruelty. How do you know my name? Sarah demanded. Your nameplate is on your bag, Solomon answered with gentle amusement. But even without that, there are ways we know things. The Force speaks to those who listen. Ethan suddenly gasped, his face contorting in pain. The blackness around his wound seemed to pulse, spreading further along the veins of his chest. He fell back against the porch railing, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Get him inside, Sarah said, medical instinct overriding her confusion and fear. That wound is getting worse. With David's help, she managed to get Ethan into her living room and onto her couch. His skin burned with fever, the unnatural blackness continuing to spread from the wound. Solomon hovered nearby, his aged face lined with concern. This magic is designed to kill slowly to make the alpha suffer before death takes him, Solomon explained. It feeds on his strength, his life force. Sarah placed her hand on Ethan's forehead, alarmed by the heat radiating from his skin. He needs antibiotics, fluids, proper medical care. Medicine will not help against this magic, Solomon said quietly. Only one thing might. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, she felt that strange tingling in her palms again. Acting on instinct, she placed her hand directly over Ethan's wound. Immediately, a warmth flooded through her fingers, and to her astonishment, a soft golden light emanated from beneath her skin, illuminating the room. Ethan's eyes flew open, locking with hers in shared amazement. The blackness around his wound receded slightly, the angry red inflammation visibly reducing. The veins running from the wound lightened, returning to their normal color. How are you doing that? David demanded, taking a step back. Sarah shook her head, as shocked as they were. I don't know, I just wanted to help to take away the pain. Solomon moved closer, studying her with newfound intensity. 50 years, he murmured. It's been 50 years since I've seen power like this. People with your gifts are called healers, rare even among the supernatural communities. Sarah pulled her hand away, staring at her palm in confusion. That's not possible. I'm not supernatural. I'm just me. Your mother's name was Elizabeth, wasn't it? Solomon asked quietly. And your grandmother was Margaret Connor. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. How could you possibly know that? Because I met your grandmother during the winter of 1972. She saved our pack from a sickness that was decimating us much as you are saving our alpha now. Solomon's eyes held memories that spanned decades. She warned us then that Morgana would return someday, and now it seems she has. Outside, the howls of the pack suddenly changed tone, becoming more urgent warning. David moved to the window, peering into the darkness. Movement in the eastern woods, he reported tersely. Multiple contacts approaching fast. Ethan struggled to sit up despite his condition. Kieran, he said grimly, he's making his move. Solomon turned to Sarah, urgency in his aged voice. Your grandmother was a healer of great power. She chose to hide her abilities to protect her family from those who would exploit such gifts. But it seems the power didn't die with her. It lives in you. Sarah felt memories stirring long buried, her grandmother's hands glowing softly as she treated a cut on Sarah's knee, the way animals would approach her without fear. The strange books hidden in her attic, filled with symbols and handwritten notes. This can't be happening, Sarah whispered. A crash from outside interrupted her thoughts. The sound of snarling and snapping filled the air as Ethan's pack engaged with unseen attackers. They've found us, Ethan said, struggling to his feet despite his weakness. Sarah, stay inside. David, coordinate the defense. Solomon, get her to safety if things go south. As David rushed outside, Ethan turned to Sarah, his amber eyes intense. I'm sorry you've been drawn into our war. But whatever happens next, know that what you did tonight matters. You saved me when no one else could." With that, he staggered toward the door, his body already beginning the transformation back to wolf form. Bones cracked and shifted, his human form blurring as fur rippled across his skin. "Wait," Sarah called out, a sudden panic gripping her. "You're still injured. You can't fight." But where Ethan had stood now crouched a massive silver wolf, amber eyes glowing with determination. With one last look at Sarah, he bounded into the night toward the sounds of battle. Solomon placed a gnarled hand on Sarah's shoulder. "He is Alpha. He must lead even wounded." His gray eyes held ancient wisdom. "But perhaps you can still help him if you're willing to embrace what you truly are." Sarah looked down at her hands, still tingling with power she didn't understand. "And what am I exactly, Bo?" "The last of a bloodline thought lost," Solomon answered, "and perhaps our only hope against what comes." Outside, the battle intensified, growls and howls, mixing with human shouts and the crack of gunfire. Sarah felt torn between terror and a strange sense of destiny, as if her entire life had been leading to this moment. "Your grandmother's attic," Solomon said suddenly. "Did she keep a silver pendant? A circle with 3 interlocking spirals?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Yes, I found it after she died. I keep it in my bedroom." "Get it," Solomon urged. "Quickly. It's more than jewelry. It's a conduit for your power of protection against dark magic." As Sarah hurried to her bedroom, a memory surfaced from childhood. Her grandmother sitting beside her bed, voice soft in the darkness. "One day, little one, you might feel different, special. When that day comes, remember that power without purpose is like a river without banks. It destroys everything in its path." The jewelry box sat on her dresser untouched for years. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay the silver pendant her grandmother had worn every day until her death. Sarah had always been drawn to it, but had never understood why. Now, as her fingers closed around the cool metal, she felt a resonance, as if the pendant recognized her touch. A thunderous crash shook the house. Sarah ran back to the living room to find Solomon standing at the window, his expression grave. "Kieran's forces are greater than we anticipated," he said, "and they bring dark magic. Look." Through the window, Sarah saw figures moving in the glow of porch lights. Some were wolves, massive and sleek, fighting with brutal efficiency against Ethan's pack. Others were human in form, wielding weapons that gleamed with unnatural light. At their center stood a man of imposing height, his blonde hair almost white in the darkness. Beside him walked a woman in a flowing black dress, her hands weaving patterns in the air that left trails of sickly green light. "Kieran," Solomon nodded toward the blonde man, and beside him Morgana, the witch. As Sarah watched, Ethan in his wolf form launched himself at Kieran, a silver blur of fury and fangs. But the witch raised her hand and Ethan was thrown backward, as if struck by an invisible force. He landed hard, struggling to rise as the blackness around his wound visibly spread tendrils of darkness crawling across his silver fur. "They're killing him," Sarah gasped, a surge of protective rage rising within her. Solomon's hand closed around her wrist. "The pendant. Put it on." Sarah slipped the chain over her head. The moment the pendant touched her skin, it warmed instantly, and she felt a surge of energy flow through her body, as if dormant parts of herself were suddenly awakening. "Your grandmother was not just any healer," Solomon said quietly. "She was a shield bearer, one who could not only heal wounds, but protect against magic itself. It is a rare gift, one that has been hunted nearly to extinction." "Is that why my mother never spoke of her, why we moved so often when I was a child?" Sarah asked, pieces of her fragmented childhood suddenly falling into place. Solomon nodded. "Your grandmother made powerful enemies when she opposed Morgana 50 years ago. She knew they would come for her bloodline eventually." Outside, David had shifted to wolf form, a dark brown beast fighting alongside Ethan, but they were clearly outnumbered. The witch Morgana was directing some kind of attack that left Ethan's wolves disoriented, stumbling as if poisoned. "I have to help them," Sarah said, moving toward the door. Solomon caught her arm. "You are untrained. Your power is raw, instinctive. Facing Morgana now would be suicide." "Then train me," Sarah demanded, surprising herself with her own certainty. "Show me what to do, how to control it." Solomon studied her face, seeming to weigh something in his mind. Then he nodded once, decisive. "Very well. First lesson then. The power is not in your hands, though that is how it manifests. It's in your intent, your will. Focus on what you wish to accomplish, not how. Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating on the feeling that had flowed through her when she healed Ethan. She thought of his wound, the unnatural blackness receding under her touch, the veins returning to normal. Good, Solomon murmured, watching as the pendant began to glow softly. Now think of extending that healing outward like ripples in a pond. Sarah visualized her power spreading beyond herself, flowing like water toward those who needed it. The pendant glowed brighter, and a strange pressure built behind her eyes. A sudden crash jolted her back to awareness. The front door burst open and David staggered in, returned to human form, blood streaming from multiple wounds. His eyes were wild with panic. "They've taken Ethan," he gasped. "Kieran has him. They're retreating into the forest." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why would they take him and not kill him? "Bait," Solomon said grimly. "They want us to follow. Or perhaps they have other plans for an alpha of his power." David braced himself against the wall, breathing heavily. "We have to go after them. Now." Solomon shook his head. "Not yet. We need a plan, and you need healing." He turned to Sarah. "Can you help him?" Sarah looked at David's injuries, then at her hands still tingling with awakened power. The pendant warmed against her skin and almost eager. She moved toward David, who watched her warily but did not retreat. "I'll try," she said, placing her hands over the worst of his wounds. As she concentrated, golden light flowed from her fingers into David's torn flesh. The wounds began to close, the bleeding slowing, then stopping. David's eyes widened in astonishment. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "Your grandmother would say that some questions don't need answers, only acceptance," Solomon replied with a small smile. He turned back to Sarah. "There is much you need to know and little time to teach you. Your bloodline, the history of the healers, the war that has been waging in shadow for centuries." Sarah finished healing David's wounds, surprised at how natural it felt, as if she had always known how to do this, but had somehow forgotten. "Tell me everything." Solomon moved to the window, looking out at the forest where Ethan had been taken. It began over 300 years ago, when the first healers formed an alliance with werewolves against those who would hunt both our kinds, a pact sealed in blood and magic. Sarah felt a strange sense of homecoming as she listened, as if pieces of herself long missing were finally falling into place. The storm continued to rage outside, but a different kind of storm was brewing within her, a power awakening that would change everything. In the distance, a howl rose above the wind, a call filled with pain and defiance. Ethan calling to his pack. Without thinking, Sarah moved to the door, her hand clutching the pendant. "I can feel him," she said, surprised. "I can sense where they're taking him." Solomon and David exchanged a glance filled with meaning. That, Solomon said quietly, is because the bond has already begun to form, a connection between healer and alpha that transcends ordinary ties. Sarah looked out into the storm-lashed forest toward the invisible thread that seemed to pull at her very soul. "Then we follow it," she said with newfound determination. "We find him and we bring him home." And in that moment, surrounded by creatures she had believed were mere myth, Sarah Connor felt for the first time in her life that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The forest had grown silent, save for the relentless patter of rain. Dawn approached, a faint grayness seeping through the storm clouds as Sarah packed supplies into a weatherproof backpack. Her hands moved with purpose, selecting items with a certainty that felt both foreign and familiar. "Salt from the kitchen," Solomon instructed, watching her preparations. "And those candles from your emergency kit. They will serve as anchors for protective magic." Sarah followed his directions without question, a strange calm having settled over her initial panic. David paced the living room, now fully healed, but radiating tension like heat from a forge. Two other pack members had joined them inside, a woman named Elise, with sharp features and calculating eyes, and a younger man called Marcus, whose nervous energy filled the room. "Every minute we delay, the alpha grows weaker," David growled. "We should move now." Solomon remained unruffled by the urgency around him. "Rush into Kieran's territory unprepared and you might as well slit your own throats. The witch will be expecting us." Sarah closed her backpack, the silver pendant warm against her skin. "I've been thinking about what you said about my grandmother and this Morgana. Why would she target my family specifically?" Solomon's weathered face grew solemn. "Because your bloodline is ancient and powerful. The Connors are descended from one of the original Shield-Bearer family's healers who could not only mend flesh, but protect against dark magic. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words. And because Morgana and your grandmother were once like sisters. The room fell silent. Even David stopped his pacing to stare at Solomon. What do you mean like sisters? Sarah asked. Not by blood, but by covenant. They trained together in the old ways, shared knowledge, protected each other. Until Morgana chose a different path, one that demanded sacrifice and blood. Solomon's eyes grew distant with memory. Your grandmother stood against her, sealed her away with ancient magic. A seal that required Margaret to surrender much of her own power. Sarah remembered her grandmother in her final years, frail and tired, yet somehow still radiating an inner strength. Is that why she was always exhausted? Why she aged so quickly near the end? Solomon nodded. The seal was powered by her life force. When she passed, it began to weaken. Now Morgana has found a way to break free completely, and she has allied herself with Kieran, a wolf who seeks to challenge Ethan for control of the territory. But what does that have to do with me? Sarah asked, though a part of her already knew the answer. The seal can only be fully broken by the blood of the one who created it, or their direct descendant. Solomon's gray eyes fixed on her with solemn intensity. You, Sarah Connor. The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Sarah felt the pendant pulse against her chest, as if responding to her quickened heartbeat. Then we don't just need to rescue Ethan, she said slowly. We need to stop them from using me to break the seal completely. Precisely, Solomon confirmed, which is why we must proceed with caution and preparation. David exhaled sharply. Fine, but we move within the hour. I can feel the Alpha's pain through the pack bond. He's alive but suffering. Sarah touched the pendant, focusing on the strange connection she'd felt earlier. The invisible thread between her and Ethan remained a tenuous link that pulled eastward into the depths of the forest. Along that thread, she could sense his presence, his life force diminished but still burning like a distant flame. He's in pain, she confirmed quietly, but fighting it. Solomon watched her with newfound respect. The connection forms already stronger than I expected. Perhaps there is hope after all. For the next hour, Solomon guided Sarah through basic techniques to control and direct her awakening abilities. She learned to channel healing energy more precisely, to sense the presence of dark magic, to recognize the subtle differences between natural illness and supernatural affliction. Your power comes from life itself, Solomon explained as they practiced. The same force that makes trees grow and hearts beat. The healers learned to channel this energy, to direct it where needed. Why are there so few healers now? Sarah asked, watching golden light flow between her fingertips as she practiced. Solomon's expression darkened. They were hunted, by humans who feared their power, and by creatures like Morgana who coveted it. By the mid-20th century, only a handful of bloodlines remained, most in hiding, like your grandmother. And werewolves, how do you fit into all this? A small smile crossed Solomon's face. We have always been natural allies to the healers. Our kind is bound to nature in ways humans have forgotten. And we live long enough to remember what others choose to forget. How old are you, Solomon? Sarah asked, realizing she had assumed he was simply an elderly man, perhaps in his 70s. I have seen 2 centuries pass, he answered simply. Though that is not considered remarkable among our kind. Ethan himself is nearly 120, though he appears much younger to human eyes. Sarah absorbed this information, adjusting her understanding of the world with each new revelation. And this connection I feel to Ethan, is that normal? Solomon's eyes twinkled with knowing. The bond between an alpha and a healer is rare and precious. It strengthens both, creating something greater than either alone. He paused, his expression growing serious. But it also makes you valuable to those who would control such power. Morgana will sense it forming. It will make her desperate and therefore more dangerous. We're ready, David announced from the doorway. The storm had finally subsided, leaving the forest draped in misty dawn light. Our scouts report Kieran's forces have retreated to the old mining camp in Black Ridge Canyon. The ironworks, Solomon murmured, a place of old power, the boundary between human industry and wild nature. She chose well. The rescue party formed quickly. Sarah, Solomon, David, and 3 other werewolves selected for their tracking and fighting abilities. As they prepared to depart, Sarah took one last look at her cabin, suddenly aware that she might never see it the same way again. The simple life she had built for herself, defined by isolation and routine, seemed to belong to someone else now, a woman who hadn't yet awakened to her true nature. They moved through the forest with surprising speed, the werewolves navigating the dense underbrush with preternatural ease. Sarah found herself keeping pace better than she expected, energy flowing through her limbs, as if the forest itself lent her strength. The pendant glowed softly against her skin, warming whenever they approached certain ancient trees or crossed small streams. The land remembers, Solomon explained when she asked about this phenomenon. These places hold power accumulated over centuries. Your pendant responds to them, draws strength from them. As they traveled, Solomon shared more about the history of healers and werewolves, knowledge preserved through oral tradition rather than written texts. Sarah learned that healers had once been revered across cultures, called by different names but recognized for their unique abilities. The ancient alliance with werewolves had formed naturally as both groups sought to protect themselves from those who would exploit or destroy them. Your grandmother was one of the strongest healers I ever encountered, Solomon told her as they paused beside a stream to rest. She saved our pack during a terrible winter, when a magical plague swept through our territory. Dozens would have died without her intervention. Why didn't she ever tell me? Sarah asked, dipping her hands in the cool water. Why keep it secret? Solomon's face grew somber. After she sealed Morgana away, Margaret made the difficult choice to suppress her powers and live as an ordinary human. She married had your mother tried to lead a normal life. But she knew Morgana's followers still searched for her, so she taught your mother to hide, to deny any unusual abilities, to blend into human society. And my mother taught me the same, Sarah realized, remembering her mother's constant warnings about standing out, about being too different. The strange nomadic childhood suddenly made sense, the midnight moves to new towns, the insistence on privacy and discretion. Your mother likely had the gift as well, but never developed it, Solomon continued. Many healer bloodlines became diluted over generations, the power dormant but never truly gone, until something awakens it. Like finding an injured alpha werewolf on my porch during a storm, Sarah said with a wry smile. Solomon nodded. The universe has its own way of bringing together what belongs together. David approached from where he had been scouting ahead. We're getting crumbs. I can smell Kieran's pack all through these woods. And something else, Mitchell. His nose wrinkled in disgust. Magic. Dark and bitter. Solomon tensed visibly. Morgana has been busy. We must proceed with extreme caution now. They continued more slowly, David leading the way with frequent stops to scent the air and listen to the forest. The terrain grew steeper as they approached Black Ridge Canyon, the trees thinning to reveal glimpses of rocky cliffs and the rusted remains of old mining equipment. Sarah felt the connection to Ethan growing stronger as they drew closer, but also more painful. Through their mysterious bond, she could sense his suffering, feel echoes of whatever torment Morgana was inflicting upon him. The pendant seemed to pulse in response, growing warmer against her skin. They're hurting him, she whispered to Solomon. I can feel it. He is strong, Solomon assured her. An alpha of his power can withstand much. Why take him alive at all? Sarah asked. If Kieran wants to be alpha, why not just kill Ethan? Because Ethan's power cannot simply be taken by killing him, Solomon explained. True alpha status must be earned or willingly surrendered. Kieran hopes to break Ethan to force him to submit before his pack. And Morgana, he hesitated. Morgana likely has her own reasons for keeping him alive. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Sarah felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. This man she barely knew, this creature from myth and legend, had somehow become important to her in ways she couldn't fully explain. They crested a ridge and paused, looking down into the canyon below. The abandoned mining camp sprawled across the valley floor, a collection of weathered wooden buildings clustered around the gaping mouth of a mine shaft. Rusted equipment lay scattered between structures, and a partially collapsed water tower listed dangerously to one side. Signs of occupation were evident, movement between buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, and the unmistakable forms of wolves patrolling the perimeter. I count at least 15 guards, David murmured, his keen eyes scanning the camp. Half in wolf form, half human. But Sarah's attention was drawn to something else entirely. To her newly awakened senses, the camp was overlaid with patterns of sickly green energy, pulsing and writhing, like living things. Dark currents of magic flowed between buildings, forming barriers and traps that would be invisible to ordinary sight. Solomon, she whispered, pointing, do you see that? The old werewolf followed her gaze and nodded grimly. Morgana's defenses. Magical wards designed to disorient, trap, or kill intruders. He studied the patterns with narrowed eyes. Impressive work for one who has been sealed away for decades. She must have been gathering strength for some time. Can we get through them? David asked. Not easily, Solomon admitted. But perhaps, he turned to Sarah, your gift as a shield bearer might allow you to disrupt the wards, create openings for us to pass through. I don't know how, Sarah said, doubt creeping into her voice. The golden light in her hands was one thing, but disrupting elaborate magical defenses was quite another. Trust your instincts, Solomon urged her. The knowledge is in your blood and your bones. The pendant will guide you. Sarah closed her eyes, focusing on the pendant against her skin. It seemed to whisper to her ancient knowledge, flowing into her consciousness like water finding its level. When she opened her eyes again, the patterns of magic appeared clearer, their structure and purpose more evident. I can see how they're anchored, she said with growing confidence. Each spell is tied to physical objects throughout the camp. If we disable those anchors, the spells will collapse. Solomon smiled with approval, just as your grandmother would have seen it. They formulated a plan quickly. The rescue party would split into 3 groups, approaching the camp from different directions, with Sarah guiding them through the magical defenses. Their primary objective was to locate and free Ethan, avoiding direct confrontation with Kieran and Morgana if possible. As they prepared to descend into the canyon, Sarah felt a sudden chill, as if cold fingers had brushed the back of her neck. The pendant flared hot against her skin in warning. She turned sharply, scanning the forest behind them. For just a moment, she thought she glimpsed a figure watching from the shadows between distant trees. A woman in flowing black with hair like spun silver and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Then the figure was gone, leaving Sarah wondering if it had been real or merely imagination. Something wrong? David asked, noticing her distraction. Sarah hesitated. I thought I saw... Never mind. Let's move. They descended toward the camp, moving from cover to cover with the werewolves taking point. As they approached the first magical barrier, a shimmering curtain of energy designed to trigger paralyzing fear in anyone who crossed it, Sarah stepped forward confidently. She placed her hands against the invisible barrier, feeling its malevolent intelligence pressing back against her. By blood and bone, by earth and stone, she whispered words rising from some deep ancestral memory. By the light that burns in darkness, I deny you passage to our hearts. The barrier shattered like glass fragments of magical energy, dissipating into the air. The effort left Sarah momentarily dizzy, a sharp pain lancing through her head, but the path forward was clear. Well done, Solomon murmured, steadying her with a gentle hand. Your grandmother would be proud. They encountered layer after layer of magical defenses as they infiltrated the camp. Illusions that tried to turn them against each other, wards that attempted to drain their life force traps, that would have triggered devastating magical attacks. Each time Sarah found the words and gestures needed to neutralize or bypass them, drawing on knowledge she hadn't known she possessed. But each victory weakened her further. By the time they reached the central area of the camp, blood trickled from her nose and her hands trembled with exhaustion. The magical exertion was taking its toll on her untrained abilities. Through a grimy window of what had once been the foreman's office, they finally spotted Ethan. He was bound to a chair with chains that glowed with unnatural light, his head slumped forward in apparent unconsciousness. 2 guards flanked him, one in human form, the other a massive gray wolf with yellow eyes. And in the shadows at the back of the room stood a figure that made Sarah's blood run cold. The witch was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles carved deep by years of dark practice. Her hair hung in stringy white tendrils, and her clothes were layers of tattered black fabric that seemed to absorb the light around them. When she turned toward the window, her eyes were solid black, not a trace of white or iris visible. She knows we're here, Sarah whispered, feeling those obsidian eyes boring into her soul, despite the distance between them. The witch smiled, revealing teeth filed to sharp points. She raised her hands and Sarah felt a new attack begin, not aimed at their minds or hearts, but at their very life force. The air around them began to thicken like tar, each breath becoming a struggle. She's trying to suffocate us with our own breath, Sarah gasped, recognizing the spell. from some ancestral memory. Instead of fighting directly against the magical assault, Sarah reached deeper into herself, feeling the presence of her foremothers more clearly now. Generations of women who had stood against the darkness, who had paid prices in blood and spirit to protect those they loved. Their power flowed into her, burning through her like acid, but providing the strength she needed. The suffocation spell shattered, but three more took its place. The witch was powerful, her magic honed by decades of practice. Sarah found herself fighting on multiple fronts, maintaining shields to protect her companions, while simultaneously attacking the spells, holding Ethan prisoner. Blood flowed freely from her nose now, and her hands trembled violently with the strain of channeling so much power through her untrained body. "I can't hold this much longer," she warned through gritted teeth, her voice strained with effort. David and two other werewolves seized the opportunity provided by Sarah's magical cover to break into the building. The human guard fell quickly to David's claws, but the wolf proved more dangerous, its enhanced strength and speed making it a formidable opponent. As the werewolves battled inside, Sarah's concentration slipped. The witch struck then, sending a bolt of pure malice directly at Sarah's heart. She barely managed to deflect it, but the effort sent her to her knees. The building around them began to shake as competing magical forces tore at the foundations of reality. Inside, David managed to break Ethan's bonds with desperate strength. But as they prepared to flee, the witch played her final card. From hidden positions around the camp, more guards emerged. But these weren't ordinary werewolves. They moved wrong, their eyes glowing with unnatural light, black veins visible beneath their fur. Enchanted, Solomon realized with horror. She's poisoned them with dark magic. The corrupted wolves attacked with mindless savagery, feeling no pain, showing no mercy. Each wound they inflicted carried the same dark poison that had nearly killed Ethan earlier. Even worse, their claws and teeth seemed to bypass ordinary defenses, seeking vital areas with unnatural precision. Sarah threw herself into the battle with desperate fury, pouring every ounce of remaining power into healing and protection spells. She purged poison from wounds, shielded vulnerable fighters from magical attacks, and turned aside blows that would have been fatal. But with each spell, each desperate intervention, Sarah felt herself burning out. The magical energy was consuming her from within, demanding a price her mortal body couldn't afford to pay. When the last corrupted wolf fell, she collapsed completely, her consciousness flickering like a candle in a hurricane. Through the haze of exhaustion, she heard voices arguing above her. Some of the pack members, who had arrived as reinforcements, were voicing doubts about her nature and her power. "She's too dangerous," a harsh voice she recognized as Marcus cut through the discussion. "That much power in untrained hands. What happens when she loses control?" "She saved us," David countered, his own voice weak but determined. "All of us. Without her, I'd be dead, and probably Ethan too." Sarah barely heard the debate. She was floating in a space between consciousness and oblivion, her spirits scattered like leaves in a windstorm. The voices of her ancestors called to her, offering rest, offering peace, but also warning that if she let go now, she might not find her way back. Then she felt strong arms lifting her, cradling her with infinite care. Ethan's scent surrounded her, pine and earth, and something uniquely his that made her feel safe even in the darkness. "She's burning up," she heard him say, his voice tight with concern. Her pulse is racing, but her breathing's too shallow. "I've never seen the alpha like this," David murmured to someone else, wonder coloring his words. "Not about anyone." Sarah tried to open her eyes to speak, to reassure them that she would be all right, but the effort was beyond her. The magical exhaustion had drained something essential from her spirit, leaving her as fragile as morning frost. As they carried her away from the ruined mining camp, Sarah felt the boundaries between her consciousness and the magical world growing thin. She could sense every pack member's emotions, could feel the wildlife in the forest stirring at their passage, could taste the lingering traces of Morgana's malevolent power on the night air. The abilities that had saved them all were refusing to quiet down, burning through her system like a fever. She was connected to everything now, the earth beneath them, the stars above, the complex web of relationships binding the pack together. It was beautiful and terrible and completely overwhelming. Through it all, Ethan's steady heartbeat against her ear served as an anchor to sanity. His arms never loosened their protective hold, and she could feel his worry radiating outward like heat from a forge. Whatever was happening between them, whatever connection had sparked that first night, it was growing stronger with each passing hour. As they finally reached the safety of Sarah's cabin, she managed to whisper a single word, Ethan. His response was immediate, his voice rough with emotion. I'm here. You're safe. Just rest now. Sarah let herself sink into the darkness, then trusting him to watch over her while she fought to rebuild her shattered defenses. David had been freed, but Morgana had escaped, and Sarah knew with bone-deep certainty that the witch would return stronger and more determined than ever. The battle was won, but the war for her soul and her heritage was just beginning. Sarah drifted through a landscape of dreams and memories that were not entirely her own. She saw her grandmother as a young woman, hands glowing with healing light, as she tended to injured werewolves. She witnessed ancient ceremonies in forest clearings, healers and werewolves bound in alliance against common enemies. But most vividly, she glimpsed Morgana and her grandmother as girls, their fingers intertwined as they practiced their craft together beneath a massive oak tree, their laughter echoing across a sunlit meadow before darkness and ambition tore them apart. Between these visions floated another figure, Solomon younger, his hair still dark, eyes alight with admiration as he watched the two young women work. The tenderness in his gaze when it fell upon Morgana revealed a truth that spanned centuries. When Sarah finally opened her eyes, golden afternoon light streamed through her bedroom window. Her body felt heavy, as if she'd been ill for weeks, but her mind was surprisingly clear. The silver pendant still rested against her chest, warm and comforting, like a living thing. Welcome back, said a gentle voice. Solomon sat in a chair beside her bed, his weathered hands folded in his lap. He looked older somehow, the lines in his face deeper than before, as if whatever had kept him youthful for 2 centuries was slowly ebbing away. How long was I out? Sarah asked, her voice raspy from disuse. 3 days, Solomon replied. Your body needed time to recover from channeling so much power without proper training. Even your grandmother would have struggled with what you accomplished at the mining camp. Sarah pushed herself up against the pillows, memories flooding back with startling clarity. Ethan, David. Are they all right? Both recovered thanks to you. Solomon smiled, though something haunted lingered in his gray eyes. Though Ethan has hardly left your side these past days. I finally convinced him to rest by promising to alert him the moment you woke. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest at the mention of Ethan's vigil. The connection between them had only grown stronger during her unconscious state. Even now, she could sense his presence somewhere in the cabin, his energy distinct and somehow familiar, as if she had known it all her life. The bond between them was no longer a tenuous thread, but a golden cord pulsing with shared life force. Morgana escaped, she said, the witch's obsidian eyes still vivid in her memory. Solomon nodded gravely. Yes, and she grows stronger by the day. The seal your grandmother created has weakened considerably. He hesitated, fingers tracing an old scar on the back of his hand. There's something you should know about Morgana and me. Sarah studied his face, remembering the visions from her dreams. You loved her once. Surprise flickered across Solomon's features. The pendant showed you. Fragments only. You and her before everything. Solomon's gaze grew distant, fixed on memories from another lifetime. She wasn't always as you've seen her. Morgana was brilliant, compassionate, a prodigy even among healers. Your grandmother and she were like sisters, inseparable from childhood. His voice softened, and I was young, barely a century old when I met them both. Werewolves and healers still worked together openly then. What happened? Sarah asked, though she sensed the answer would bring pain. Power happened, or rather, the promise of it. Solomon's expression darkened. There was a tome, ancient forbidden, discovered in the ruins of a temple. It contained secrets of extending life, enhancing natural abilities beyond their limits. Your grandmother wanted to destroy it. Morgana wanted to study it. And you, Solomon's shoulders slumped slightly. I hesitated when I should have acted. I tried to be neutral when I should have taken a side. By the time I realized the corruption spreading through her, it was too late. His eyes met Sarah's, filled with centuries of regret. Perhaps that's why I've lived so long, penance for my failure. Sarah touched the pendant thoughtfully. In my dreams, I saw things, ceremonies I couldn't possibly know about. Were they real? The pendant contains not just power, but memory, Solomon explained, seeming relieved by the change of subject. The collective knowledge of your bloodline passed down through generations. What you saw were echoes of the past preserved within the silver. Sarah studied the interlocking spirals on the pendant's face. Is that why it feels alive sometimes? In a sense, it is. Generations of healers have poured their wisdom, their experiences, their very essence into it. It's more than a conduit for power, it's a repository of your heritage. Solomon leaned forward. Your grandmother was the last to add to its collection before she sealed her powers away. Sarah swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her strength. Her body ached, but the bone-deep exhaustion had faded. Then show me how to use it properly. No more fumbling in the dark. Solomon studied her face, seeming to measure her determination against some internal scale. The path of a healer is not an easy one, Sarah. Once you fully embrace your heritage, there is no going back to what you were before. I think that ship sailed the moment I found an injured werewolf on my porch, Sarah replied with a wry smile. She stood carefully, steadying herself against the bedpost. Besides, Morgana won't stop coming for me, will she? No, Solomon admitted. You are both threat and prize to her. Your blood could complete the breaking of the seal, and your power, if controlled by her, would make her nearly unstoppable. A soft knock interrupted them. Ethan stood in the doorway, his powerful frame somehow managing to look uncertain. His amber eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her breath catch. Through their bond, she felt his relief wash over her like a warm tide along with something deeper he wasn't yet ready to name. You're awake, he said simply. Solomon rose from his chair with a knowing smile. I'll leave you two to talk. There's much to discuss. As he passed Ethan in the doorway, he placed a hand on the alpha's shoulder, a gesture of both respect and affection that carried the weight of shared history. When they were alone, a strange awkwardness fell between them. Sarah was suddenly acutely aware of her disheveled appearance after days unconscious, while Ethan seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, as if afraid a wrong word might shatter something precious. Thank you, Ethan said, finally remaining in the doorway as if uncertain of his welcome. What you did at the mining camp, I've never seen anything like it. Sarah shrugged, embarrassed by the intensity of his gratitude. I barely knew what I was doing. It was mostly instinct. Instinct that saved my life, saved all of us. Ethan took a tentative step into the room. David told me how you shielded the pack from Morgana's attacks even as it drained you. How are you feeling? Sarah asked, changing the subject. Your wound, is it completely healed? Ethan nodded unconsciously, touching his shoulder where the bullet had struck. Thanks to you, not even a scar remains. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. Sarah, there's something you should know about what's happening between us. This bond. Before he could continue, commotion erupted outside the cabin. Voices raised in alarm, the sound of running footsteps. Ethan was instantly alert, moving to the window with preternatural speed. What is it? Sarah asked, joining him. Scouts returning. Ethan replied, his expression darkening. And they're not alone. Outside, two werewolves in human form were helping a third stumble toward the cabin. The injured wolf was in bad shape, blood staining his clothing, his face ashen with pain. Sarah and Ethan hurried downstairs and outside to meet them. David was already there, issuing orders to strengthen the perimeter security. What happened? Ethan demanded as they reached the injured man. Ambush! The wolf gasped, his voice strained. We were patrolling the eastern boundary. They came out of nowhere. Black magic. Couldn't even smell them coming. His eyes found Sarah, widening with recognition. They have Tyler Kieran's son. The witch is using him, controlling Kieran through the boy. Sarah moved forward, already reaching for her healing power. The pendant warmed against her skin as golden light gathered in her palms. The injured wolf's eyes widened at the sight, a mixture of awe and fear crossing his face. Let me help, Sarah said gently, placing her hands over his most serious injuries. As the healing energy flowed from her fingers, Sarah could sense the dark magic infecting the wounds, the same malevolent force she had encountered at the mining camp. But this time she was prepared for it. With careful precision, she isolated the darkness, drew it out, and neutralized it before sending waves of healing energy into the damaged tissue. The tainted magic felt oily, slick with malice, and it fought her as she contained it. The wolf sighed with relief as his wounds began to close, color returning to his face. Thank you, healer, he murmured, using the title with reverence. Solomon appeared beside them, his expression grave as he studied the now healing wounds. Morgana's work is growing stronger, more controlled. She's regaining her full power faster than I expected. He turned to the scout. Tell us about the boy. How old? Where are they keeping him? Maybe 10 years old, the scout replied, strength returning to his voice. I glimpsed him at their camp. Kieran was different when the child was mentioned. Not the arrogant challenger we know, desperate. A father protecting his child, Ethan murmured, understanding in his voice. That changes things. How many attacked you? David asked. At least a dozen wolves led by Kieran, and the witch was with them directing the attack. The scout shuddered at the memory. She asked about the healer, wanted to know if the bond had formed yet. All eyes turned to Sarah, who felt a chill run down her spine. Bond, what bond? Solomon and Ethan exchanged a meaningful look. Before either could respond, more howls erupted from the forest closer than before, and carrying notes of challenge and aggression. They followed our scouts back, David realized with alarm. They're coming for us, for her. Ethan's face hardened with resolve. Get everyone into defensive positions. Solomon, stay with Sarah. Teach her what she needs to know quickly. As the pack mobilized around them, Ethan turned to Sarah, his amber eyes intense. Whatever happens in the next few hours, remember that you are stronger than you know. Trust your instincts, trust your heritage. He hesitated, then added more softly, trust what you feel. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan shifted forms, his human shape blurring and reforming into the massive silver wolf she had first encountered on that stormy night. With one last meaningful look, he bounded away to coordinate the defense of the property. Come, Solomon urged, taking Sarah's arm. There's little time and much you need to understand. Inside the cabin, Solomon guided Sarah to the kitchen table where he had prepared various items, candles, herbs, small pouches of salt, and an ancient leather-bound book that seemed to hum with its own energy. The pages were yellowed with age, the binding cracked and worn by countless hands that had sought its wisdom before her. The bond Morgana spoke of is the connection between an alpha and a healer, Solomon explained, as he arranged the items in a specific pattern. It's rare, formed only when a true alpha and a powerful healer's energies align in perfect harmony. It strengthens both, allowing the healer to channel power through the alpha and the alpha to lend stability to the healer. And this bond is forming between Ethan and me, Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. The invisible thread connecting them had grown stronger each day, a constant awareness of his presence even when they were apart. It began the moment you healed his wound, Solomon confirmed. Such bonds were once commonplace in the days when werewolves and healers worked together openly. Now they are almost unheard of. He opened the ancient book, revealing, which is covered in flowing script and intricate diagrams. A fully formed alpha healer bond is nearly unbreakable, a sharing of strength and purpose that transcends ordinary ties. And Morgana wants to prevent this bond from completing, Sarah guessed. Solomon's expression darkened. Worse, she wants to corrupt it, use it for her own purposes. If she could capture both you and Ethan, bind you to her will. He shook his head, unwilling to complete the thought. But there's something else you should know about these bonds. They often form between those whose souls are compatible in other ways as well. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks as she understood his meaning. Through the bond, she sensed a flicker of Ethan's awareness turning toward her, as if her emotions had called to him even across distance. Outside, the sounds of battle began. Snarls and howls mixed with human shouts and the crack of weapons. Sarah felt each member of Ethan's pack through her expanded awareness, their courage and determination flowing like a current around the property. We don't have much time, Solomon said urgently. The bond must be completed and protected before Morgana can interfere. He opened the ancient book to a page marked with symbols similar to those on Sarah's pendant. Your grandmother left this with me for safekeeping, knowing someday it might be needed again. A ritual to strengthen and shield the alpha healer bond. It will create a protection that even Morgana cannot easily break. A tremendous crash shook the cabin, followed by shouts of warning from outside. The battle was intensifying, moving closer to the house itself. We need Ethan here for this, Sarah realized, scanning the instructions. Solomon nodded grimly. And therein lies our challenge. He will not abandon his pack while they fight. Sarah closed her eyes, focusing on the thread connecting her to Ethan. Through it, she could sense his fierce concentration, the calculated fury with which he defended his territory. She sent a pulse of energy along that connection, a silent plea for his attention. The response was immediate. Surprise, acknowledgement, and a wordless promise to come when possible. Sarah opened her eyes to find Solomon watching her with undisguised wonder. "The bond is already stronger than I realized," he murmured. "Perhaps there is hope after all." They worked quickly preparing the elements needed for the ritual. Solomon taught Sarah the words she would need to speak ancient phrases in a language that felt familiar to her tongue despite never having heard it before. "This language is older than written history," Solomon explained. "The first healers shaped these words when humanity was young." As they worked, Sarah became aware of a presence approaching the cabin. Not the chaotic energy of battle, but something focused and malevolent. A chill ran through her, the pendant growing cold against her skin. "Morgana," she whispered, looking toward the window. Solomon tensed, following her gaze. "She comes herself, then. The prize must be great indeed." Outside, the fighting seemed to pause, a strange stillness falling over the property. Then a voice called out, clear and commanding, despite its age. "Send out the healer, Ethan Gray. Send her out, and your pack may live. Keep her and watch them all die one by one." Sarah moved to the window, peering through the curtains. Morgana stood in the center of the yard, her black robes billowing around her, though there was no wind. Behind her, Kieran and his wolves held several of Ethan's pack members, captive claws at their throats. But what caught Sarah's attention was the small figure beside Morgana, a boy no more than 10 years old with Kieran's fair hair and haunted eyes. The child stood unnaturally still, a faint greenish aura surrounding him. Magical bindings, Sarah realized with a surge of anger. Morgana was using the child to control his father. Ethan himself stood opposite Morgana, back in human form, now his expression a mask of cold fury. David and the remaining pack members formed a protective semicircle behind him, many bleeding from wounds but still defiant. "She belongs to no one, least of all you," Ethan replied, his voice carrying the authority of his position. "And my pack is not so easily broken." Morgana laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Such pride, young alpha. But I have lived centuries longer than you've seen empires rise and fall. Your defiance is nothing." Her hand came to rest on the boy's shoulder, making him flinch. "And what of Kieran's pride? See how quickly it crumbles when something precious is threatened." She raised her other hand and black energy crackled between her fingers. "Perhaps a demonstration is in order." Before she could strike, Sarah was moving, flinging open the door and stepping onto the porch. The pendant blazed with sudden heat against her skin, responding to her surge of protective rage. "I'm the one you want, Morgana," she called out. "Leave them alone. Leave the boy alone." The witch turned toward her, obsidian eyes widening with something like delight. At last, Margaret's granddaughter shows herself. Her gaze fell to the pendant at Sarah's throat. "Wearing the family heirloom, I see. How touching." Ethan moved to stand between Sarah and Morgana, his body tense with readiness. "Sarah, go back inside." "No," Sarah replied firmly, stepping forward to stand beside him. "This is my fight too." Morgana studied them both, a knowing smile spreading across her ancient face. "The bond forms already. I can see it, a golden thread between you." Her expression hardened, a thread easily severed. She flung out her hand, sending a bolt of black energy directly at Ethan. Without thinking, Sarah moved her hand, shooting out to intercept the attack. Golden light erupted from her palm, meeting the darkness midair. The two forces collided with a thunderous crack, sending shockwaves across the clearing. The moment their powers touched, Sarah felt a surge of memory that wasn't her own. She saw Morgana and her grandmother, as young women saw the moment ambition turned to betrayal, saw the ritual that sealed Morgana away at terrible cost. The memories weren't just images, but emotions too. The anguish of broken trust, the bitterness of perceived betrayal, the cold determination to survive at any cost. And beneath it all, a profound loneliness that had festered for decades. As the energies dissipated, Morgana staggered slightly, surprise flickering across her face. "So she taught you more than I expected." "She taught me nothing," Sarah replied, steadying herself against the draining effect of the magical confrontation. "But her blood runs in my veins, and it remembers you." Solomon appeared in the doorway behind them, the ancient book in his hands. "It's time, Sarah. The ritual must be completed now." Morgana's expression contorted with sudden fury. "No," she gestured sharply, and Kieran's wolves began dragging their captives forward. "One step toward that ritual and they die. The boy dies." It was a standoff, neither side willing to yield. Sarah could feel Ethan's tension beside her, his desire to protect his pack warring with the knowledge that the bond must be completed. Through their growing connection, she sensed his thoughts as clearly as if he had spoken them distraction needed. In that moment, she noticed Kieran's eyes fixed not on Ethan or herself, but on his son. There was naked anguish there, and behind it, a desperate calculation. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, an alliance born of shared opposition to Morgana's cruelty. Solomon moved with surprising speed for one so old. He flung a handful of herbs into the air, shouting words in the ancient language. The herbs ignited mid-air, creating a blinding flash of light that momentarily disoriented Morgana and her forces. Now, Solomon shouted. Chaos erupted. Ethan's pack members seized the moment of confusion to break free from their captors, turning the tables on their surprised enemies. Kieran lunged not at Ethan but at Morgana herself, his focus entirely on reaching his son. The witch, caught off guard by his betrayal, blasted him backward with a surge of dark energy. Ethan grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her back toward the cabin, as Solomon created a barrier of swirling golden energy to hold off pursuit. Inside, Solomon quickly arranged the ritual elements on the floor, candles igniting with a thought. Quickly, both of you in the center. Sarah and Ethan stepped into the circle of candles, their hands still joined. Outside, the fighting had resumed with renewed intensity, but it seemed distant now, as if they had stepped into a pocket of calm within the storm. The words Sarah, Solomon urged, opening the book to the marked page. Speak them with intent. Sarah began reciting the ancient phrases, the language flowing from her lips as if she had spoken it all her life. As she spoke, the pendant blazed with brilliant light, and similar illumination began to emanate from the circle around them. Ethan joined her somehow, knowing the responses without being taught, his deep voice weaving with hers in perfect harmony. With each exchange, the light grew stronger, spiraling around them in complex patterns that matched the symbols in the book. Solomon watched with solemn approval, adding his own voice at key moments, the three of them creating a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the cabin. As they reached the culmination of the ritual, Sarah felt the bond between her and Ethan crystallize into something tangible, a golden cord of light that connected them heart to heart. Through it flowed not just power but understanding, a wordless communication deeper than language. In that moment of perfect connection, she saw Ethan clearly, his centuries of life, the burdens of leadership, the loneliness of command. And she knew he saw her just as clearly, her isolation, her unacknowledged gifts, her lifetime of feeling different without understanding why. The ritual reached its apex, light flaring so brightly that it momentarily blinded them. When it faded, the bond remained stronger than before, and now protected by layers of magical shielding that glowed with soft iridescence. It is done, Solomon said quietly, closing the ancient book. The Alpha Healer bond, it is complete and warded against corruption. Outside, a scream of rage split the air, Morgana sensing what had occurred. The cabin shook as waves of dark energy battered against it, seeking entry, seeking to destroy what had just been created. She cannot break it now, Solomon assured them, though strain showed on his face as he reinforced the cabin's protections. But her fury will be terrible to behold. Ethan squeezed Sarah's hand, the gesture conveying both reassurance and resolve. Through their bond, she felt his determination, his absolute commitment to protecting her and his pack. It was a heady feeling, this connection to another soul, both foreign and strangely familiar. What now? Sarah asked, looking between Ethan and Solomon. Solomon's aged face grew solemn. Now we face her before her power grows any stronger. The bond gives you advantages she does not expect. A tremendous crash shook the cabin as something heavy struck the outer wall. The magical protections flared in response, holding but visibly strained. She's bringing down the house, Ethan said grimly. We need to move this fight away from here, away from the pack. Sarah nodded, understanding flowing between them without words. We draw her away, confront her on ground of our choosing. And save the boy, Ethan added. Kieran's betrayal of Morgana changes things. He could be an ally now, not an enemy. Solomon looked between them, pride mixing with worry on his weathered face. The northern clearing where the ley lines converge. It will strengthen your bond and give you access to the Earth's own power. Another crash, this one splintering wood somewhere on the eastern side of the cabin. The protection spells flared brighter in response, but Solomon winced clearly, feeling the strain of maintaining them. Go, he urged them. I will hold her here as long as possible, give you time to reach the clearing. We can't leave you, Sarah protested, even as she felt Ethan's reluctant agreement with Solomon's plan through their bond. Solomon smiled a gentle expression that somehow made him look younger despite his years. I have lived 2 centuries, child. I have seen more of life than most could dream. He took her hand, his touch conveying a lifetime of memories, quiet evenings by firelight, battles fought side by side, wisdom shared over countless seasons. And I have waited 50 years for this moment, for the chance to face Morgana again. Understanding dawned on Sarah. You loved her once. Before the darkness took her, yes. Solomon admitted, his gray eyes distant with memory. Which is why I must be the one to face her now. Some circles must be closed by those who open them. He pressed something into Sarah's palm, a small wooden carving of a wolf polished smooth by decades of handling. This was meant for her once, perhaps it still is in a way. Ethan placed a hand on Solomon's shoulder, a gesture of profound respect. The pack will honor you, old friend, whatever comes. Solomon nodded, then turned to Sarah. Your grandmother would be proud of the woman you have become. She always believed her granddaughter would finish what she started. His expression grew fierce suddenly. But do not make her mistake. Margaret contained the darkness, but she did not heal it. You must find another way, or this cycle will only begin again. Sarah felt the weight of his words settle into her bones, a truth she had somehow always known. I understand. Now go, both of you, Solomon said, straightening to his full height. Fulfill the destiny that brought you together. I will give you time. They left through the back door as Solomon reinforced the front of the cabin, drawing Morgana's attention with increasingly powerful counterspells. The diversion worked. They slipped into the forest undetected, Ethan leading the way with the silent surety of one who knew every tree and stone of his territory. As they moved deeper into the woods, Sarah felt the bond between them strengthening further, resonating with the natural energy of the forest. Through it, she sensed Ethan's concern for Solomon, his strategic assessment of their chances, his fierce protectiveness toward her. He's buying us time at great cost, Ethan said softly as they paused in a small hollow to catch their breath. Solomon has been preparing for this confrontation for decades. Will he survive? Sarah asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Ethan's expression was grim. His plan was never survival, but containment. He believes he can weaken her significantly, perhaps long enough for us to complete what your grandmother began. As they continued northward, Sarah caught sight of the movement through the trees, Kieran carrying his son, the boy unconscious but free of the magical bindings that had held him. The rival alpha locked eyes with Ethan, a moment of silent communication passing between them. Follow, Ethan said simply. We share a purpose now. Kieran nodded once, falling in behind them without hesitation. The terrain grew steeper as they ascended toward the ridgeline. Sarah could feel the ley lines Solomon had mentioned, currents of natural energy flowing beneath the earth like underground rivers. The pendant responded to their presence, growing warmer as they approached the convergence point. Behind them, a column of black smoke suddenly rose above the tree line, the cabin burning. Sarah felt a stab of grief, both for her home and for Solomon, whose presence she could no longer sense in the magical landscape around them. In its place was a strange emptiness, a silence where his steady wisdom had been. He's gone, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Ethan paused, looking back at the smoke with a moment of silent acknowledgement. Not gone, he said softly. Part of him lives on in you now, in what he taught you, in what he sacrificed for. His hand found hers warm and steadying. We honor him by finishing this. The clearing when they reached it was perfectly circular and carpeted with moss and small white flowers that seemed to glow in the fading daylight. 7 ancient oak trees formed a ring around its perimeter, their massive trunks twisted by centuries of growth. The air here felt different, charged, expectant, as if the place itself was alive and aware of their presence. Kieran gently laid his son beneath one of the oaks, brushing the boy's hair back with tender care. I will protect him with my life, he said, not to Ethan but to Sarah. End this, for all our sakes. Sarah immediately sensed the convergence of ley lines beneath them, powerful currents of earth energy intersecting directly under the center of the clearing. The pendant blazed against her skin, drawing strength from this natural wellspring. What now? She asked, turning to Ethan. Before he could answer, a cold voice spoke from the edge of the clearing. Now you die together as fitting for bonded pairs." Morgana stood between two of the ancient oaks, her black robe scorched and torn, her silver hair wild around her face. But most shocking was the change in her eyes. Where before they had been solid black, now they glowed with an inner fire as if something else looked out through them. "Solomon is gone," she announced with cruel satisfaction. His life force was quite invigorating. Grief and rage surged through Sarah, amplified by Ethan's own response through their bond. The pendant flared in response to her emotions, golden light spilling from beneath her clothing. "Don't let her provoke you," Ethan cautioned quietly, his hand finding hers. "That's what she wants." Morgana stepped fully into the clearing, and Sarah noticed with a chill that the witch's feet didn't quite touch the ground, as if gravity itself rejected her presence. "I offered you power once, child," Morgana said, addressing Sarah directly. "Power beyond imagining. I offer it one last time. Join me, embrace your true heritage, and I will spare your wolf and his pitiful pack." Sarah felt Ethan tense beside her, ready to defend against an attack. Through their bond flowed his absolute confidence in her, his unspoken assurance that whatever she decided, he would support her. Kieran had shifted to wolf form, a massive golden beast crouched protectively over his son. In that moment, with perfect clarity, Sarah understood what her grandmother had faced decades ago, the same choice between easy power and difficult right. Margaret Connor had chosen to sacrifice her own abilities to contain the threat, but Sarah realized there was another way, a path her grandmother hadn't seen. Solomon's last words echoed in her mind, "Do not make her mistake." Margaret contained the darkness, but she did not heal it. "My true heritage isn't just power," Sarah replied, stepping forward. "It's choice. My grandmother chose to contain you, to sacrifice herself rather than destroy you, because even then she remembered what you had once been to each other." Morgana's face twisted with contempt. "Sentiment, weakness. She could have ruled beside me." "No," Sarah said quietly. "She could have healed you, as I will now." "Heal me," Morgana laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. "You cannot heal what is not broken, girl. This is evolution, transcendence beyond your pitiful understanding." "I saw you," Sarah countered, "in my dreams. The real you before the corruption. I saw you with my grandmother, with Solomon. You were happy then." For just an instant, something flickered behind Morgana's fiery eyes, a shadow of the woman she had once been struggling against centuries of darkness. Before the witch could recover, Sarah lunged forward, her hands outstretched, not with violence, but with the same healing intent she had used on Ethan's wound. Golden light erupted from her palms, reaching for Morgana like living tendrils. Morgana screamed, throwing up barriers of black energy, but Sarah had surprised her with an attack she hadn't expected. Not destruction, but healing. Through their mind, Ethan poured his strength into Sarah, stabilizing her as she channeled more power than ever before. The ley lines beneath the clearing responded, earth energy surging upward through Sarah's body, amplifying her abilities beyond what she could have managed alone. The pendant blazed like a small sun against her chest, ancestral power joining with her own. At first it seemed to be working. The golden light pierced Morgana's barriers, reaching toward the witch with gentle persistence. But then the darkness fought back, not just deflecting Sarah's power, but corrupting it, turning the golden tendrils sickly green where they touched the witch's defenses. Sarah staggered under the backlash, blood trickling from her nose with the strain. Morgana laughed, advancing with renewed confidence. "You cannot heal what embraces its nature, child. My darkness is not a disease. It is my strength, my essence." "She's too far gone," Ethan murmured, supporting Sarah as she swayed. "Centuries of corruption have changed her very being." Sarah refused to accept defeat. Through their bond, she drew on Ethan's strength, his stability, his unwavering support. There has to be a way. Solomon believed it. As if in answer, she felt the wooden wolf carving in her pocket grow warm. Solomon's final gift. With sudden understanding, she pulled it out, the simple figurine somehow glowing with its own inner light. "What is that?" Morgana demanded, sudden uncertainty in her voice. "A reminder," Sarah replied, holding the carving toward the witch, "of who you were, who you could be again." Through the bond, she sensed rather than heard Ethan's realization. He shifted to wolf form beside her, the massive silver beast, a physical manifestation of his support. Sarah placed one hand on his back, the other holding the carved wolf toward Morgana. "I don't fight against you," Sarah said quietly. I fight for the healer who was lost, the sister my grandmother mourned, the woman Solomon waited 2 centuries to save. Morgana hesitated, confusion briefly replacing rage on her ancient face. In that moment of uncertainty, Sarah changed her approach. Instead of sending her healing power directly at Morgana, she channeled it through the wooden carving, through the love and memory it contained. The figurine glowed with golden light, but this time the energy that emerged was different. Not Sarah's power alone, but something mingled with Solomon's essence, with the decades of devotion he had poured into this simple object. This light, when it reached Morgana, didn't try to burn away the darkness. Instead, it enveloped it, except it offered not destruction, but transformation. "What are you doing?" Morgana shrieked, her barriers weakening as this new approach circumvented her defenses. "What a healer does," Sarah answered, her voice steady despite the enormous energy flowing through her. "I'm healing the wound that turned you from my grandmother's sister to her enemy." Through their connection, Sarah could see it now, the moment centuries ago when Morgana had tapped into forbidden magic, allowing darkness to enter her soul in exchange for extended life and greater power. The corruption had spread like a cancer, transforming a gifted healer into something twisted and malevolent. That corruption was what Sarah targeted now, her healing energy, seeking not to burn it away, but to transform it, to integrate it into something whole again. It was delicate, dangerous work requiring precision even as it demanded enormous power. Ethan remained beside her, his wolf form a solid anchor as she swayed under the strain. Through their bond, she drew on his strength, his stability, his unwavering support. Morgana fought viciously at first, lashing out with centuries of accumulated dark power. But gradually her attacks weakened, growing confused and directionless. The fire in her eyes flickered, revealing brief glimpses of human pain beneath the supernatural rage. The confrontation reached its peak as Morgana, desperate now, attempted to seize control of the ley lines themselves, to corrupt the very earth energy Sarah was channeling. The clearing trembled, the ancient oaks groaning as their roots felt the disturbance below. "I will not be undone by a child." Morgana raged, her form beginning to blur at the edges as she drew on increasingly dangerous powers. Sarah felt something give way within the witch, not surrender, but catastrophic instability. The darkness she had harbored for centuries was fighting back against Sarah's healing, tearing Morgana apart from within. "She's losing control," Sarah gasped, sensing the impending magical backlash. "Everyone get back!" Ethan shifted back to human form, shouting orders. Kieran snatched up his son and retreated to the edge of the trees. Only Ethan remained with Sarah, their bond now so strong that separation was unthinkable. In the center of the clearing, Morgana's form began to dissolve, dark energy spiraling outward in violent eddies. Her face, momentarily visible through the chaos, showed not anger, but fear, and in the final moments at a flash of recognition of the woman she had once been. "Margaret," she whispered, her voice suddenly young again, reaching towards Sarah with a hand that was more light than substance. Sarah thrust the wooden wolf carving into that ephemeral hand, a final connection, bridging centuries of conflict. "For remembrance," she said softly, "from Solomon." Morgana's eyes cleared for just an instant, the black fire receding to reveal human eyes filled with sudden understanding. "Tell him, I remember the oak tree. I remember summer." Then with a sound like thunder, the energies collapsed inward. A blinding flash lit the clearing, and when it faded, Morgana was gone. Where she had stood, a small silver sapling now grew, its leaves softly luminescent in the gathering dusk. Sarah swayed, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Ethan caught her before she could fall, gathering her gently against his chest. Through their bond flowed his awe at what she had accomplished, his relief at their survival, and something deeper, warmer. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "Not destruction," Sarah said softly, looking at the silver sapling. "Transformation. She'll have another chance someday when the tree bears fruit." Kieran approached cautiously, his son awake now and clinging to his father's neck. He stopped a respectful distance from Ethan and Sarah, then slowly lowered himself to one knee, head bowed. "Alpha Gray," he said formally, "my pack and I withdraw our challenge. We were deceived by Morgana's promises and manipulations. I ask for peace between our territories." Ethan regarded him steadily, his arms still supporting Sarah. "There will be peace," he declared, "but there will also be reparations for the harm done. Solomon's life cannot be replaced." Kieran nodded solemnly, his son watching with solemn eyes from the circle of his arms. "We will honor his memory as our own. His wisdom and sacrifice will not be forgotten. He hesitated, then added, "My son and I owe you a life debt, healer. Whatever you need whenever you call, we will answer." As the two alphas negotiated terms, Sarah felt the full weight of exhaustion settling over her. The clearing, the ley lines, even the bond with Ethan all seemed to recede slightly, growing distant as her overtaxed body and mind demanded rest. Ethan sensed her fading awareness immediately. Without breaking his conversation with Kieran, he swept her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Sarah let her head rest against his shoulder, feeling utterly safe despite everything they had just endured. Through their bond, she felt his silent promise: rest. "I have you now. Always." The journey back through the forest passed in a blur for Sarah. She was vaguely aware of joining up with the rest of Ethan's pack of sympathetic murmurs and respectful glances of decisions being made about where to go since her cabin was now destroyed. Eventually they arrived at what appeared to be Ethan's own home, a spacious lodge built of stone and timber, nestled against the side of the mountain. Inside was warm and welcoming, with large open spaces designed to accommodate pack gatherings and quieter private areas for rest. David and others from the pack came and went, reporting on the aftermath of the battle, the status of the injured, the arrangements for those displaced by the fighting. Through it all, Ethan kept Sarah close, including her in every discussion, his hand often finding hers as if to reassure himself of her continued presence. As night fell, the pack gathered in the main hall of the lodge for a solemn ceremony. A small pyre had been built in the stone hearth, and upon it they placed items that had belonged to Solomon: his weathered leather journal, a carved wooden wolf he had always carried strands of silver from his hair. David stepped forward, his usual gruffness softened by grief. "I was barely more than a pup when I first met Solomon," he began. "Lost my parents to hunters, couldn't control my shifts. He found me in the mountains, half-starved and wild with grief." The pack listened in respectful silence as David shared his story: how Solomon had taught him control, had given him purpose, had shown him what it meant to be part of something greater than himself. "He never asked for gratitude," David concluded, "never wanted recognition, but he saved us all more times than we know. And in the end, he gave everything for us, as he always said he would." One by one, others came forward, each adding something small to the bar: a flower, a polished stone, a feather, symbols of respect and remembrance, sharing their own memories of the old wolf who had guided their pack for generations. When it came to Sarah's turn, she placed Solomon's wooden wolf carving among the offerings, knowing it had served its final purpose. "He found what he was looking for," she said quietly. In the end, she remembered. Ethan spoke the words of the ceremony, his deep voice carrying easily through the hall. "We return to the earth and sky that which was borrowed for a time. May the wisdom of ages guide your spirit, old friend, until you run with us again beneath the moon." The pyre was lit, flames leaping upward as the pack raised their voices in a mournful howl that seemed to shake the very timbers of the lodge. Sarah felt tears stream down her face, grief for Solomon mixing with gratitude for his sacrifice and guidance. As the ceremony concluded, the pack dispersed to various tasks, some shifting to wolf form to run patrols, others seeing to the needs of those still recovering from injuries. Sarah found herself on the wide porch of the lodge, looking out at the star-filled sky, the silver pendant cool against her skin now that its immediate purpose had been fulfilled. Ethan joined her there, offering a steaming mug of tea that smelled of herbs and honey. "For strength," he explained as she accepted it gratefully. They stood in comfortable silence for a time, side by side, watching the night. Through their bond, words seemed unnecessary. Sarah could feel his grief for Solomon, his relief at the pack's survival, his concern for her well-being, and beneath it all, a steady warmth whenever his thoughts turned to her. "What happens now?" she asked finally, voicing the question that had been hovering at the edges of her mind. Ethan considered her question carefully. "For the pack, rebuilding, healing, strengthening our borders while honoring the peace with Kieran." He turned to face her fully, his amber eyes reflecting the starlight. "But for you, that's a choice only you can make." Sarah understood what he was offering: freedom to choose her own path forward, despite the bond that now connected them. She could return to her human life, resume her career as a nurse, live in the world she had always known. The bond would remain, but at distance and time might soften its intensity. Or she could embrace her heritage, completely become the healer that her bloodline had always intended, live among the pack, and learn the full extent of her abilities. Looking into Ethan's eyes, feeling the steady reassurance of his presence through their bond, Sarah found the choice was already made. Perhaps it had been made the moment she had found a wounded wolf on her porch and chosen to help rather than flee. "My place is here now," she said simply. "With the pack. With you." The joy that flooded through their bond at her words was answer enough, but Ethan put it into words anyway. "You honor us with your choice, Sarah Connor. The pack gains not just a healer, but a heart." He took her hand, his touch sending warmth spiraling through their connection. "And I gain not just a bonded partner, but a future I never dared to imagine." When under the vast canopy of stars with the forest breathing around them and the pack secure within the lodge, Sarah felt the last pieces of her old self fall away. Not lost, but transformed, just as the silver sapling in the northern clearing represented Morgana's chance at eventual renewal. "I'm not the outcast nurse anymore," she said softly, a sense of wonder in her voice. "I've found where I belong." Ethan's smile held the promise of countless dawns to come. "No," he agreed, drawing her closer. "You are Sarah Connor, healer of the Grey Pack, bearer of ancient power, and keeper of my heart." As their lips met under the witness of stars, Sarah felt the bond between them pulse with joyful certainty. The journey ahead would hold challenges, yet unfaced powers still to be mastered, a heritage still being rediscovered. But she would face it all with Ethan beside her, with the pack around her, and with the wisdom of her ancestors to guide her way. That night, as she drifted towards sleep in the quiet of Ethan's home, Sarah's hand closed around the pendant once more. In its silver surface, she caught a fleeting glimpse of something unexpected. Other lights, distant but distinct, moving across the continent. Other healers, she realized with sudden clarity. Others of her kind awakening to their heritage, perhaps seeking the same connection she had found. The outcast had found her home at last. But perhaps this was just the beginning of a much larger story.